Welcome back to World History Chapter 4.5. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's go back and review and take a look at some of these Egyptian gods. You've got, he's known by Ra, Re. If you're real close with them, you can call him Amon-Re. But he's got a brother named Horus that we're going to talk about in a minute. Here's Osiris. Here's Isis. These are all Egyptian gods that you could have or should have read about. And then here's the difference between Horus and Ra, because here's Horus, okay? What is Horus wearing? Exactly. He's wearing the crown of both Lower and Upper Egypt. I just want you to notice that. Okay, great. So here's what we're learning about today. You need to know New Kingdom. Last time we learned about Old Kingdom. You don't really learn about Middle Kingdom in middle school. Sorry about that. So we're skipping to New Kingdom. It's the height of Egyptian power, but I want you to notice that in the New Kingdom, the pyramids are thousands of years old already. So if you're at school in New Kingdom Egypt, you're learning about ancient pyramids even back then, okay? We'll learn about the female pharaoh, Hatshepsut. Hopefully I pronounced that pretty good. I think I did okay. And then you need to know what the Rosetta Stone is. There's one Rosetta Stone, and you'll hear the phrase in archaeology, we need to find a Rosetta Stone or find another Rosetta Stone. So what does that mean? Understand how trade affects Egypt. Trade makes you wealthy in general. More trade, more wealth. That's one of the principal tenets of capitalism, by the way. Know why Ramses is remembered as Ramses the Great? Because Egypt had expanded out to its largest, taken over the most area. Largest empire, I guess. I know what the Rosetta Stone is. Make sure you know that by the end of the class. Okay, real quick recap. We had the Stone Age, Paleolithic people. Then we went to the agriculture, Neolithic people. And they have this division of labor and it's spreading out, new technologies and new jobs. This gives rise to civilizations. And now we have civilizations and they can trade and they can benefit from each other. And trade is sort of the next step, or in some ways, the next step trade is the next step towards human progress. Real quick, we're looking at there and seeing the first civilizations. Okay, we're at the Nile right now in Egypt. It's back. Physical geography, human geography. Okay, let's talk about Egypt. So where's the best farming located in Egypt? The Nile Delta. Great job. I knew you knew that. Okay.
Over 5,000 years ago, a civilization was born in ancient Egypt, which was to endure for the next 3,000 years. It was presided over by a long succession of kings known as pharaohs. The pharaohs were considered to have been born as divine beings, destined to become gods upon their death and to join Ra, the great sun god, in the sky. The first of the pharaohs is considered to be King Menes, who founded a dynasty in 3100 BC and began a period in Egyptian history which has become known as the Old Kingdom and was to last for the next 1100 years. He succeeded in uniting the upper and lower parts of Egypt into a single kingdom with a new capital, Memphis, which was located just outside of the modern city of Cairo. During this period, the first pyramids at Saqqara and Giza appeared, and many of the rituals and practices which were to last for the next 3 millennia were established. By about 2100 BC, the power of the pharaohs had declined considerably, and many parts of the country had fallen under the control of local tribal leaders with their own small kingdoms. This interval, referred to as the First Intermediate Period, was to last for about 100 years, until the turmoil was ended by a warlord from Upper Egypt, Mentuhotep II of the 11th dynasty. Mentuhotep manages to defeat the kings of Lower Egypt and reunite the country into a single kingdom again. In doing so, he ushers in a period of great wealth and prosperity, known as the Middle Kingdom. Under his rule, the capital is moved south to Thebes, near today's city of Luxor. However, 600 years later, the power of the pharaoh had once again declined, and fragmentation and political turmoil returned. During this time, known as the Second Intermediate Period, Egypt was again divided into two parts, until 1550 BC, when it was reunited by the pharaohs of the 16th and 17th dynasties. And so began its most prosperous and successful era, known as the New Kingdom. This is the period in which the most well-known of the Egyptian kings lived. Tutankhamun, the boy pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, followed some 50 years later by the great Ramses II. By this time, the practice of using pyramids as royal burial sites had long gone in favour of using deep underground tombs located just outside of Thebes in the area which has become known as the Valley of the Kings. By 1070 BC, the grip of the pharaohs was once again diminishing as the country once again became fragmented. Although there were some brief periods of respite during the so-called Third Intermediate and Late periods, native Egyptian rule was to come to an end, as the country was dominated for long periods by Assyrian and later Persian rule until it was finally conquered and reunited in 332 BC by the leader of the Greek Empire, Alexander the Great. Under his auspices, a new capital, Alexandria, was established on the Mediterranean coast, and on his death, one of his generals, Ptolemy, became the first of a Greek line of pharaohs.
New Kingdom, it's the height of power and glory in Egypt. Military protection becomes military expansion. Okay, remember, Egypt's hard to attack, and especially one side they've got the desert, the other side they've got the Nile. So here, let's watch how they grow. They grow up towards the north and down the river. Look at this here, this empire of Kush. We'll be talking about them next time. Just look at them on the map, be able to find them, okay? That's great. Hatshepsut, the woman pharaoh, her monuments are going to be destroyed. Why is that? Let's watch this TED Talk that'll cover it.
3,500 years ago in Egypt, a noble pharaoh was the victim of a violent attack. But the attack was not physical. This royal had been dead for 20 years. The attack was historical, an act of damnatio memoriae, the damnation of memory. Somebody smashed the pharaoh's statues, took a chisel, and attempted to erase the pharaoh's name and image from history. Who was this pharaoh, and what was behind the attack? Here's the key. The pharaoh Hatshepsut was a woman. In the normal course of things, she should never have been pharaoh. Although it was legal for a woman to be a monarch, it disturbed some essential Egyptian beliefs. Firstly, the pharaoh was known as the living embodiment of the male god Horus. Secondly, disturbance to the tradition of rule by men was a serious challenge to Ma'at, a word for truth expressing a belief in order and justice, vital to the Egyptians. Hatshepsut had perhaps tried to adapt to this belief in the link between order and patriarchy through her titles. She took the name Ma'at Kare and sometimes referred to herself as Hatshepsu, with a masculine word ending. But apparently, these efforts didn't convince everyone, and perhaps someone erased Hatshepsut's image so that the world would forget the disturbance to Ma'at and Egypt could be balanced again. Hatshepsut, moreover, was not the legitimate heir to the throne, but a regent, a kind of stand-in co-monarch. The Egyptian kingship traditionally passed from father to son. It passed from Thutmose I to his son Thutmose II, Hatshepsut's husband. It should have passed from Thutmose II directly to his son Thutmose III. But Thutmose III was a little boy when his father died. Hatshepsut, the dead pharaoh's chief wife and widow, stepped in to help as her stepson's regent, but ended up ruling beside him as a fully fledged pharaoh. Perhaps Thutmose III was angry about this. Perhaps he was the one who erased her images. It's also possible that someone wanted to dishonor Hatshepsut because she was a bad pharaoh. But the evidence suggests she was actually pretty good. She competently fulfilled the traditional roles of the office. She was a great builder. Her mortuary temple, Djeser Djeseru, was an architectural phenomenon at the time and is still admired today. She enhanced the economy of Egypt, conducting a very successful trade mission to the distant land of Punt. She had strong religious connections. She even claimed to be the daughter of the state god Amun. And she had a successful military career, with a Nubian campaign and claims she fought alongside her soldiers in battle. Of course, we have to be careful when we assess the success of Hatshepsut's career, since most of the evidence was written by Hatshepsut herself. She tells her own story in pictures and writing on the walls of her mortuary temple and the red chapel she built for Amun. So who committed the crimes against Hatshepsut's memory? The most popular suspect is her stepson, nephew, and co-ruler, Thutmose III. Did he do it out of anger because she stole his throne? This is unlikely, since the damage wasn't done until 20 years after Hatshepsut died. That's a long time to hang on to anger and then act in a rage. Maybe Thutmose III did it to make his own reign look stronger, but it is most likely that he or someone else erased the images so that people would forget that a woman ever sat on Egypt's throne. This gender anomaly was simply too much of a threat to Ma'at and had to be obliterated from history. Happily, the ancient censors were not quite thorough enough. Enough evidence survived for us to piece together what happened, so the story of this unique, powerful woman can now be told.
Okay, welcome back. If you remember in Mesopotamia, I don't know if we did a good job of Saba the Hutt, Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, Assyrians, Hittites. Here where it says they fought the Hittites to a draw, then you know that they're on the later edges of Mesopotamia. I hope that helps you, okay? Anyhow, Ramses the Great, he builds forts, the temple at Karnak, that's very famous, the last of the great pharaohs. Then Egypt gets attacked by the Sea People. And we don't really know who the Sea People are. Isn't that interesting? Okay, here's some cool Egyptian vocab. An obelisk is this tall thing. You notice we have one in Washington, D.C., the Washington Monument. Those are people standing on it. Gives you kind of a size of how big that is. It's giant. Okay, here's the Rosetta Stone. They find a stone and it contains hieroglyphics, Old Egyptian, and Greek. And because it contains these languages and people can speak Greek, they can translate what things mean, and it unlocks what the hieroglyphs mean. So the Rosetta Stone is what allows them to translate hieroglyphics. The other important part of the Rosetta Stone is that people are always looking for the new Rosetta Stone. So if they get some artifact and they can't read it, they'll say, hey, we just need to find this new Rosetta Stone. I just want you to know what that means. It means the ability to translate, in this case, hieroglyphics. Okay? Here's a short video about the Rosetta Stone.
We're in the British Museum, and we're looking at one of the most important objects in the collection, the Rosetta Stone.
It's in a glass case, surrounded by people who are taking pictures of it.
People love it.
They do, and there's gifts in a gift shop about it.
You can get your own little Rosetta Stone. You can get Rosetta Stone
Exactly.
posters.
On a mug.
I think you can get a doormat Rosetta Stone.
Yeah.
But the stone itself is historically incredibly important. It allowed us, for the first time, to be able to understand, to be able to read, to be able to translate hieroglyphics.
Hieroglyphics was the written language of the ancient Egyptians, and until the mid-19th century, we really didn't know what it said.
The language itself is pictorial, and actually that led to one of the real confusions, because I think that early archaeologists believed, and linguists believed, that the pictures they could see, you can make out birds and snakes and various different kinds of forms, actually referred in some way to a specific thing in the world.
Right, so if you saw a bird, it somehow referred to a bird.
And in fact, that's not the case. This
Right.
is a far more sophisticated language.
And the Rosetta Stone was really what helped them to understand that Egyptian hieroglyphics are not pictorial, they're not pictographs, they're actually phonetic. So all those things that look like pictures actually represent sounds. And that's how they were able to finally figure out and translate ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics.
And the reason we were able to do that is because this stone said the same statement 3 times in 3 different languages. So the 3 languages are Ancient Greek, which is down at the bottom. Now that was the language of the administration. That was the language of government. And the reason for that is because Alexander the Great had conquered Egypt and had set up the sort of Greek rule in this Hellenistic era, and that maintained itself in ancient Egypt.
Let's remember we're talking around 200 BC here.
Which is
All right, math and history class, I know you love it. Check this out. It's a special ancient Egyptian way of measuring where the eye of Horus gets cut down and then it gets cut down again and it can never be whole. Isn't that interesting? Here, look, they'll tell you more.
One of the earliest representations of these fractions came from a hieroglyph which had great mystical significance. It's called the Eye of Horus. Horus was an Old Kingdom god, depicted as half man, half falcon. According to legend, Horus's father was killed by his other son, Seth. Horus was determined to avenge the murder. During one particularly fierce battle, Seth ripped out Horus's eye, tore it up, and scattered it over Egypt. But the gods were looking favourably on Horus. They gathered up the scattered pieces and reassembled the eye. Each part of the eye represented a different fraction, each one half the fraction before. Although the original eye represented a whole unit, the reassembled eye is 1/64th short. Although the Egyptians stopped at 1/64, implicit in this picture is the possibility of adding more fractions, halving them each time, the sum getting closer and closer to 1, but never quite reaching it. This is the first hint of something called a geometric series, and it appears at a number of points in the Rhind papyrus. But the concept of infinite series would remain hidden until the mathematicians of Asia discovered it centuries later.
All right, welcome back. Remember Ra? Okay, the temple at Karnak is one of the largest temples, and it's made to honor Ra. Page 104 in your book. I highly advise you check it out. Check out some cool pictures. Okay, so understand how trade affected Egypt and its neighbors. Trade, in general, makes you wealthy and makes your neighbors wealthier, whoever you're trading with. Okay, Ramses the Great, he's known as Ramses the Great because that's the height of Egyptian control of land. I'm not having good vocab with that. The height of Egyptian power, but it's when they control the most land. What's the Rosetta Stone? Exactly. Good job. All right. That's it for chapter 4. Actually, that's it for this part of chapter 4. Next time, we learn about Kush. I'll see you then.